Turning 80 doesn't bring sudden collapse. It brings quiet changes, so slow they feel harmless, until daily confidence, balance, memory, or independence begins to thin. This is not about fear but awareness, while there is still time to protect dignity. After 80, change rarely announces itself. There is no single morning when everything feels different. Instead, life adjusts in quiet increments. A step that once felt steady now asks for a moment of focus. A name takes a few extra seconds to arrive. Fatigue appears earlier in the afternoon, then lingers a little longer than it used to. None of this feels dramatic enough to mention. It feels ordinary, almost expected, which is why it often goes unexplained. For many older adults, these changes are never clearly described by others. Conversations about aging tend to focus on extremes, either perfect vitality or sudden decline. What gets lost is the long middle stretch where small shifts accumulate slowly. Because nothing feels urgent, nothing feels worthy of attention. The body adapts quietly, and the mind follows along, telling itself that this is simply how life works now. What makes this stage difficult is not the changes themselves, but how invisible they are. A person can still manage daily life, still recognize themselves, still feel capable, yet something has subtly altered beneath the surface. Movements require more intention. Decisions take more mental energy. Recovery from ordinary strain stretches out longer than before. None of this feels like a problem. It feels like background noise. This is why awareness matters. Not alarm, not fear, but simple recognition. Aging after 80 is not defined by collapse. It is defined by gradual adjustment. When these adjustments go unnamed, they quietly shape behavior. People begin to avoid what feels slightly harder. They conserve energy without realizing it. They narrow their world a little at a time, believing they are being sensible. The danger is not in aging. The danger is in mistaking slow change for no change at all. When everything happens gently, it is easy to believe nothing important is happening. Yet this is the stage where attention has the most power, not to stop time, but to stay present within it. Understanding this slow shift is not about preparing for loss. It is about protecting what still exists. When changes are recognized early, they can be met with patience instead of resignation. When they are ignored, they quietly take the lead. The story of life after 80 is not written in sharp turns. It is written in soft, continuous lines that only become visible when someone pauses long enough to notice them. Many people who reach their 80s have lived through hardship, responsibility, and long seasons of self-reliance. They learned early not to complain. They learned to manage discomfort quietly. Over time, this strength becomes identity. Saying "I'm fine" is not dishonesty. It is a habit shaped by decades of endurance. Small losses often arrive wrapped in this habit. A little less energy is explained away as a normal day. A moment of unsteadiness is blamed on poor sleep. Forgetfulness becomes a joke told to ease the moment. Each explanation feels reasonable. Each dismissal feels harmless. Together, they form a pattern of silence. Pride plays a role here, but so does dignity. Many older adults do not want to be seen as fragile or dependent. They do not want to worry their children or disrupt the rhythm of life. So they adjust privately. They rest more. They double-check things quietly. They decline invitations without explanation. Life continues, just slightly smaller than before. What is rarely acknowledged is how this quiet self-management can delay attention to real needs. When everything is handled internally, no one else sees the gradual strain. Not family, not friends, sometimes not even physicians. The phrase, "I'm fine," becomes a protective shield, but also a barrier. This habit does not come from denial. It comes from resilience. But resilience can become isolating when it prevents honest reflection. Over time, the effort required to keep appearing unchanged grows heavier. The mind spends energy maintaining normalcy rather than noticing what is shifting underneath. The cost of this silence is subtle. It shows up as fatigue that feels deeper than tiredness, as hesitation where confidence once lived, as a growing sense that life requires more effort than it used to, without a clear reason why. When these feelings are never voiced, they become internalized as personal weakness instead of natural change. Breaking this habit does not require dramatic confession. It begins with permission to oneself, to notice honestly, to admit that something feels different without assigning blame or fear. Aging well after 80 is not about toughness. It is about truth told gently, first inwardly, then outwardly when needed. When "I'm fine" loosens its grip, clarity has room to enter. Loss of confidence often arrives long before loss of ability. This is one of the least discussed aspects of later aging. A person may still be capable, still skilled, still mentally present, yet begin to doubt themselves in ways that feel unfamiliar and unsettling. It starts with hesitation, a pause before stepping off a curb, a second thought before driving at night, a reluctance to speak up in conversation. None of these moments signal inability. They signal uncertainty. When the body or mind gives mixed signals, confidence begins to thin. Social spaces often feel different during this stage. Conversations move faster. Background noise feels louder. Remembering details takes more effort. Rather than risk embarrassment, some people choose silence. Rather than ask for repetition, they withdraw slightly. Over time, this withdrawal reshapes daily life. What makes this erosion quiet is that it feels reasonable. It feels like good judgment. Avoiding discomfort can look like wisdom, yet confidence is built through engagement, not avoidance. When engagement decreases, confidence weakens further, even when capacity remains. This change affects identity deeply. People who once felt sure of themselves begin to second-guess ordinary choices. They replay conversations later, wondering if they said the wrong thing. They hesitate to try new situations, not because they cannot handle them, but because uncertainty feels heavier than it used to. There is often grief beneath this process, not loud grief, but a soft mourning for the ease that once existed. Confidence was once effortless. Now it requires intention. When this grief goes unrecognized, it can harden into self-doubt. Understanding this erosion is crucial because confidence influences behavior more than ability ever does. When confidence shrinks, life contracts, not suddenly but steadily. Recognizing this pattern allows compassion to replace judgment. Confidence after 80 is not about proving strength. It is about staying gently engaged with the world, even when uncertainty whispers otherwise. Independence rarely disappears overnight. Instead, it becomes more selective. Tasks that once felt neutral now feel draining. Choices that required little thought now demand calculation. Life begins to organize itself around what feels manageable rather than what feels meaningful. This narrowing often happens unconsciously. People simplify routines to conserve energy. They reduce outings to avoid fatigue. They rely on familiar paths because unpredictability feels tiring. Each adjustment makes sense on its own. Together, they slowly redraw the boundaries of daily life. What is lost is not independence itself, but range. The ability to choose freely between options shrinks. The day becomes structured around limits that were never consciously chosen. This can lead to a quiet dissatisfaction that is hard to name. Life feels smaller, but the reason remains unclear. Family members may misinterpret this narrowing as contentment. After all, routines look stable. There are fewer complaints, fewer risks. Yet stability is not the same as fulfillment. Independence includes the freedom to stretch, to vary, to decide based on desire rather than endurance. When narrowing goes unnoticed, it can become permanent. Habits solidify. Comfort zones harden. What once felt like a temporary adjustment becomes the new normal. Reversing this later requires more effort than recognizing it early. Acknowledging this process is not about pushing beyond limits. It is about noticing when limits are shaping life without consent. Independence after 80 is not measured by how much one can do, but by how much choice remains. Protecting that choice begins with awareness, not resistance. Time changes how the body and mind respond to challenges. Small issues that might have been resolved quickly at 60 behave differently at 80. Not because recovery is impossible, but because it requires earlier attention. Delay allows patterns to settle. Waiting often feels reasonable. Why address something minor? Why make a fuss? Yet when small difficulties are allowed to repeat unchecked, they teach the body new habits. Muscles compensate. Movements adjust. The mind adapts by avoiding rather than engaging. These adaptations, once established, are harder to undo. The problem is not age. The problem is accumulation. A little imbalance leads to less movement. Less movement leads to reduced confidence. Reduced confidence leads to narrower routines. By the time attention arrives, the issue is no longer singular. It is woven into daily life. This is why early awareness preserves options, not by preventing change, but by shaping how change unfolds. When attention comes sooner, adjustments remain flexible. When it comes later, adjustments have already set their course. There is also an emotional cost to waiting. Addressing issues later often carries regret, a sense of wishing one had noticed sooner. That regret can weigh heavier than the original difficulty. Understanding this is not meant to create urgency or fear. It is meant to restore agency. Aging does not remove influence. It changes timing. Acting earlier keeps more doors open, even when change is inevitable. Paying attention after 80 is often misunderstood. It is not constant monitoring or anxious focus. It is a quiet, respectful awareness of how life feels from the inside. It is noticing patterns without rushing to judge them. This kind of attention is an act of self-respect. It honors the body's messages instead of dismissing them. It allows space for honest reflection without turning every change into a problem. Awareness becomes a form of care. Communication plays a gentle role here, not dramatic declarations, but simple sharing, naming what feels different, describing experiences without apology. When attention is shared, support becomes possible without threatening independence. Protecting quality of life at this stage is not about control. It is about presence. Staying present with one's own experience allows dignity to remain intact even as life changes. It allows decisions to be made consciously rather than by default. The goal is not to stop aging, it is to stay engaged within it. Paying attention does not weaken resilience, it refines it. It ensures that change does not quietly decide the shape of life without consent. After 80, wisdom is not found in endurance alone. It is found in listening to the body, to the mind, and to the quiet signals that appear long before damage is done.